She doesn't speak with volume. She speaks with presence. And presence, real presence, terrifies those who've spent their lives hiding in noise. The emotionally strong woman is not hard, she is whole. Her strength is not the absence of feeling, but the full permission to feel without being ruled by what arises. She's walked through fire barefoot, gathered the shattered fragments of herself after betrayals no one saw, and stitched her soul back together with golden thread. And so she becomes the canvas upon which his unconscious is projected, not as a partner, but as a portal. Her stability, her groundedness, her emotional fluency. These aren't just admired. They are consumed. The fragile man, often unaware of his own inner wounds, mistakes her emotional maturity as a sanctuary, and it is but one meant to be entered with reverence, not dependency. To her, love is a meeting of two sovereign souls, but to him it becomes a search for shelter from himself. And herein lies the paradox. The stronger she is, the more she awakens his longing. Not for her necessarily, but for the parts of himself he abandoned long ago. The little boy who was never allowed to cry. The young man told that his worth came from achievement. The grown man too terrified to sit in silence with his own rage, grief, shame. He feels these buried truths surfacing in her presence, yet has no language for them, no ritual, no roadmap. Only the magnetic pull toward what feels like home, and the unconscious fear that he will never be enough to stay there. It's important to understand, the emotionally fragile man doesn't intend to drain her. He doesn't consciously choose to become her shadow. In fact, in the early stages, he may idolize her. He places her on a pedestal, not realizing he's not seeing her, but rather the parts of himself he's trying to reclaim. And archetypally, this is classic. The anima, the feminine image within the male psyche, becomes projected outward onto a real woman. She becomes the dream, the savior, the muse. And for a moment, he feels whole through her. But projection always has an expiration date. When she reveals her complexity, her boundaries, her refusal to mother him, the spell begins to crack. Suddenly the mirror talks back. She doesn't coddle his ego. She doesn't rescue him from his pain. She holds him in love, but she doesn't dissolve into his need. And to a man still emotionally young, this feels like abandonment, rejection, even betrayal. You see, the emotionally strong woman is not here to play out another man's childhood story. She's not a nurse for unhealed boys in adult bodies. She has done the work. She has sat with her shadows, held court with her rage, wept in the arms of solitude. She has alchemized heartbreak into wisdom. She knows how to soothe without losing herself, how to witness pain without absorbing it, how to offer truth without dressing it in sugar. And so, when she begins to feel the weight of being someone else's emotional center, she withdraws, not out of cruelty, but clarity. She has learned that love without self-respect is self-erasure. She has learned that just because she can hold someone doesn't mean she should. Still, her departure often leaves behind devastation, not because she broke him, but because she triggered what was already breaking. She didn't create his fragility, she revealed it. And this, for the fragile man, can feel like collapse. The illusion of stability he built around her begins to crumble. The borrowed strength no longer available. The projection returned to sender. This moment, this rupture, is sacred. Because it holds within it a choice to retreat into blame and victimhood, or to face the wounds she exposed. Many will choose the former, but some, in the silence that follows her absence, will finally begin their real work. Not to win her back, but to meet themselves fully for the first time. Because the truth is this: strong women are not here to fix fragile men. They are here to live as whole beings. And in doing so, they become catalysts. They awaken, they disrupt, they challenge. but they do not complete what is not yet whole. That is an inner journey no one can walk for another. And yet, how often have you, watching this, played out this dance? How often have you mistaken intensity for intimacy, dependency for devotion? How many times have you tried to heal someone who did not ask for healing, only to lose pieces of yourself in the process? There is a cost to being the strong one, the one who understands, the one who holds space. And unless you, too, have fierce boundaries and self-honesty, you will begin to confuse being needed with being loved. You will begin to think you are only worthy when someone is leaning on you. But this is not love. This is enmeshment disguised as meaning. And when the fragile man realizes he cannot keep you by collapsing, he may lash out. He may call you cold, distant, unloving. But that is not your burden to carry. Let him learn the language of his own soul. Let him meet the fire you lit and choose whether to rise or retreat. You are not the lesson. You are the invitation. Not to impress, not to perform, but to reclaim what was always hers. And yet, it is this very light, forged in silence, not spectacle, that draws to her those still trembling in their own shadows. What is it, then, that causes emotionally fragile men to orbit women forged from such inner flame? It is not a flaw in her, nor a coincidence of fate. It is the unconscious law of archetypes playing out through the drama of modern love. For the fragile man is not simply weak, he is split. There's something ancient in her silence when she walks away, not from cruelty, but from clarity. It's the silence of a queen who has ruled her own pain and will not be ruled by another's. It's the silence of a woman who no longer mistakes emotional labor for love, who knows that empathy without discernment is self-abandonment in disguise. And yet, even now, the fragile man may not understand what he has lost. He might still tell himself stories, that she was too demanding, too distant, too complex. Because to admit the truth would collapse the fragile scaffolding of his identity. That her strength did not overpower him. It simply illuminated where he had none. That her emotional depth didn't drown him. It just revealed how shallow his own inner waters had become. The emotionally strong woman does not demand perfection. She doesn't ask for grandeur. But what she will never again settle for after all she's been through is a man who only loves her reflection in the mirror of her giving. She requires presence. She requires capacity. She requires a man who has faced his own dark nights, who doesn't fear the storm but respects it. A man who doesn't hide his pain but learns from it. Who doesn't worship her to escape himself but stands beside her because he has finally met himself. This is the unspoken truth about emotionally strong women. They love differently. They don't cling, they don't chase, they don't perform, they reveal, they mirror. And often they do so without even trying. Their very being calls the unconscious to the surface. To be near them is to feel the hunger of your own soul, and that for the unready is unbearable. But for the few, the rare few, who choose not to flinch, who choose to stay in the heat of that mirror and not turn away, the woman becomes not a challenge, but a compass. Because her strength isn't just survival, it's sacred. It's not hard, but soft, in the way mountains are soft, immovable, patient, enduring. She does not seek control, she seeks coherence. She does not want to lead him, she wants him to stand. And the man who can rise to meet her, he is not without wounds. He has them, but he holds them with integrity. He doesn't hide from discomfort, but sits with it. He doesn't reach for her to rescue him, but because he sees her. Not as projection, not as salvation, but as a sovereign, a companion, an equal flame. And this is the subtle difference between the fragile and the mature. The fragile man needs a woman to feel strong. The mature man is drawn to a strong woman because he is already strong. He does not fear her power because he has made peace with his own. He does not shrink in her light because he's done the shadow work that taught him how to burn without destroying. The emotionally strong woman is not hard to love. She is hard to manipulate. She's not too much. She's too honest for those still lying to themselves. She doesn't play games because she has no interest in control. Only truth, only alignment. Only love that doesn't cost her her soul. And if you are her or becoming her, let this be your reminder. You are not here to dim for anyone's comfort. You are not here to shrink so that someone else can feel big. The right man, the real man, will not ask you to soften your edges to fit his fear. He will love you as you are. And more importantly, he will love himself enough not to need your strength as a substitute for his own. To the fragile man, your love may feel like pressure. To the healed man, it will feel like home. And you, yes, you must learn to know the difference. You are not cold for walking away from someone who drained your spirit. You are not cruel for refusing to become his emotional crutch. You are not heartless for wanting love that meets you in your fullness. This is not ego. This is evolution. This is what happens when a woman chooses to stop parenting the men she dates. When she reclaims her right to be loved, not used, seen, not idealized, met, not mirrored. Some will call this selfish. Let them. It is not your job to be digestible. It is your task to be whole. And wholeness is often misunderstood by those still feeding on fragments. Let them misunderstand. The woman who has integrated her wounds doesn't need to be understood by those still ruled by theirs. She walks now with the quiet knowing of one who has tasted the hollow sweetness of validation and let it go. She no longer trades her intuition for approval. She no longer bargains her boundaries for affection. He has exiled the warrior, disowned the lover and buried the king. And when he meets a woman who has done her shadow work, who does not flinch at the truth, who owns her fire without apology, he sees, often for the first time, what it is he has forsaken within himself. But he does not know that's what he's seeing. He mistakes her centeredness for safety, her empathy for endlessness, her strength for shelter. And he begins to reach. Not to meet her, but to merge with her. And because of that, she becomes a rare and radiant thing, a woman who is free. Freedom is not the absence of longing, nor the denial of love. It is the refusal to betray oneself in its pursuit. It is the slow, sacred decision to no longer be chosen by default, but to choose deliberately. And in that freedom, she becomes magnetic, not because she tries to be, but because she no longer hides. She laughs without restraint. She weeps without shame. She speaks when it matters and holds silence when it's time. Her presence disrupts rooms not because she's loud, but because she's clear. And clarity, in a world addicted to confusion, is a revolution. The emotionally fragile man may still orbit her in memory. He may resurface with apologies laced in nostalgia. He may whisper of what could have been, but she will know now. Apologies that come without transformation are just rehearsals. She will not mistake longing for growth. She will not return to what almost loved her. Because now she no longer accepts potential as a promise. She no longer feels guilty for walking away from men who loved the feeling of her, but never had the capacity to love her. And this shift, this reclamation, ripples far beyond romance. When a woman chooses herself this deeply, she stops waiting, not just for men to catch up, but for the world to validate what she knows in her bones. She stops over-explaining. She stops over-giving. She stops living on the crumbs of connection, hoping they'll one day become a feast. She becomes the feast. And when she does, something extraordinary happens. She becomes less available. Not in the sense of isolation, but in intention. She no longer entertains dynamics that deplete her. She no longer opens her heart to every knock at the door. She listens deeply, slowly, for the resonance. For the man who doesn't flinch at her fire because he has tended to his own. That man will not be perfect, but he will be present. He will not be intimidated by her power because he will have met his own shadows and made peace with their shape. He will not idolize her. He will witness her fully, with reverence, not rescue, with sovereignty, not surrender. And when two souls like this meet, the integrated feminine and the healed masculine, they do not complete each other, they amplify. Together, they build. Not fantasies, but foundations. Not stories, but structures. Love, in its most whole form, becomes not an escape, but a container. A crucible where growth is inevitable, where truth is welcome, where both are free and both are chosen. But until that man arrives, or even if he never does, she is not waiting. Because she has become the love she sought, the shelter she needed, the mirror she used to long for in others. She knows now that solitude is not punishment, but a sacred space for integration. That being alone is not the same as being empty. That intimacy with herself is not a consolation prize, but the root from which all other connection must grow. So, to the emotionally strong women listening, you are not broken for attracting the fragile. You are magnetic because of your healing. Your light is not a mistake, it is a map. But it is not your job to guide everyone who stumbles toward it. Some will arrive only to drain, some will arrive only to reflect. A few will arrive to walk beside you. Let your discernment be your protection. Let your peace be your proof. And let your standards be set not from fear, but from truth. Because the woman who knows her worth doesn't chase, she chooses to borrow her light without realizing it is light earned, not given. What he is drawn to is not the woman herself, but the feeling of himself in her presence. For a moment, he is whole, but only for a moment. And here the tragedy begins. Because while she knows how to hold space, she also knows when the space becomes a cage. She can spot a man who needs a mother faster than he can articulate the ache in his chest. And so often she stays longer than she should, not out of weakness, but out of compassion. Because once she too was fragile. Once she too reached for someone to hold her wounds without knowing how to hold them herself. And for a moment she sees herself in him. But the mirror is not a home. And eventually the weight of being both woman and healer becomes too heavy to bear. Carl Jung once said that we meet ourselves time and again in 1,000 disguises on the path of life. And nowhere is this more true than in the dance between the strong and the wounded, between the integrated feminine and the fragmented masculine. The emotionally fragile man is not a villain. He is a boy exiled from his inner father. He has been taught that softness is shameful, that feeling is failure, that power lies in control rather than presence. He lives behind masks of achievement or withdrawal, depending on which archetype he's rejected more, the hero or the lover. And so when he meets her, this woman who does not ask for permission to feel or lead or love, he is both enchanted and undone. You've seen it, haven't you? You've been her or loved her or feared her. The woman who doesn't play games because she's already won her own war. The woman who won't explain her worth because she knows silence speaks louder. The woman who chooses herself even when it hurts. And when she loves, it is a cathedral, not a cottage, that she builds. But the fragile man doesn't know how to worship in such a place. He wants her love, but he doesn't want what it demands of him. To rise, not perform, not impress. Rise to meet her where she lives, in the realm of truth, not illusion. In the space where feelings are not distractions, but doorways. In the place where power is not dominance, but depth. And here's where the script often twists. Instead of rising, he retreats. Or worse, he clings. He asks her to explain herself over and over. He accuses her of being too much, too intense, too unavailable. when in truth she is simply unwilling to shrink. His wounded ego, sensing its death, begins to fight for survival. And it fights in the most subtle ways. Guilt, neediness, passive aggression masked as vulnerability. Not out of malice, but out of fear. Because to love a strong woman is to confront the unloved parts of yourself, and not everyone is ready for that kind of mirror.